Hi, you're Liv, and I'm Liv too. Hold on a second, I want to put on my wool socks. I prefer to not cover my feet at all. But when I do, I choose wool. Because if my feet are cold, then why fuck around? Go for broke. Choose wool. And if I got a preference, it's gonna be blue. I don't got cold feet. I just got blue feet. Good morning for me. And good insert time of sun in sky, which is to say, or rather inclusive of the sun being in the sky on the outside of the world of you if it's nighttime. And I guess that kind of has something to do with what I want to talk about. I hope you'll mind me. I'm in a particularly cosmically irradiated mood. Some solar storms going on today, which is like my own private joke because every day is a solar storm. When you like to play with the sun. Hi, I'm Elliot, and aside, if you know, like post introduction, I want to talk about something that's a little less esoteric. In fact, it's super mundane and thusly super applicable to everybody's every day. If you don't know me, I enjoy me a good piece of media. And I want to talk about that a little bit, but it's worth reiterating because, fuck me, I don't know who's watching, so I don't know how well you know me. And I don't want, or rather, it's worthy to, I don't know, be inclusive of if you're just getting to know me. Because I would consider myself 100% unplugged from the mainstream media. And then if I were to be more specific, I would continue to say I'm rather unplugged from mainstream schools of thought. If schools, like fishes, like fish eye, rather than being groups of similar swimmers conforming to each other, but only for the betterment of the flow of the school in the current. And rather they become institutions of indoctrination and taking advantage of the divine manner by which we are constructed as human beings in like biological realms. if you don't know me, this is how I talk all the time. Because I love being descriptive. In the course of my life, and I'm sure you have too, I've met those people that like to use big words. They like to be verbose. And if you're listening, it's kind of like obvious that they're using their language less to express the meaning by which they say, and instead express the meaning by saying that they know shit. And that's never been my way. I'm not by choice wired that way. I think I've always just been too careful. And I really do mean that, too careful. I've had to learn the spectrum of extremes to be understood. And so I've read a lot, mostly because books have been my best friend. And because of that, I've been exposed to lots of different ways of saying lots of different things. And so I don't choose words for any other reason than to express and subtly connotate my like deepest meaning while leaving an air of ambiguity. Because otherwise, you make like the fatal like error in communicating when by the words that you use, you expect a very certain and like one definition interpretation of what you're saying. And that's not only just not reasonable and so therefore ignorant, but it's exclusive of the listener. It's exclusive of the imagination by which all communication takes part. Right? I was watching again something or the other, talking about. Actually, I think it was like a YouTube. I think it was Joe Scott again, where he's like, he was talking about language, and he's like, oh, he's talking about mirror neurons. Ooh, don't get me started on that. That'll be something else. But he's like, pickle. You just thought of a pickle. And you did. Ain't nothing wrong with that. But what's interesting and worth noting is that my pickle and your pickle look different. And that's not a small thing. It's a big thing. It's super important. It's super important. Oh shit. So stop thinking about a pickle, Elliot. But take your time, because good feelings are worth taking the time. So as I was saying, Words in and of themselves don't mean shit. And this is contrary to the indoctrination of language use, especially in general, but as a society. To understand this a little bit, or in different realms of like relatability, consider a word like wait. Now, when I say wait, what do you hear? Like, you're taking your time, or the weight of something, as in its relationship with gravity, or something on a scale. But then in different disciplines, so let's say writing and physics, to say that something has weight, it's not just context, it's meaning. What's being implied, inferred, and mostly assumed. And the mistake in our like the common perception is that I'm just talking out of my ass right now, and none of this shit matters. When try telling that to your brain, try telling that to your memory. It absolutely does. For a frame of reference, and then I'll move on more to like the political bullshit. When, and this is science. I'm moving my hand towards you. If I say towards and move my hand towards you, or I say away, oh, it's cool, I notice it. My hand actually travels less quickly, like the connection between my brain and the action happens with a kind of dissonance. Fuck me. Hold on a second. I'm just gonna like do the double thing because I'm sensitive to noise, and there's noise. Grazie. Grazie. Prego. Yeah, as I was saying, there's a conflict that occurs in your nervous system because all language, it has a vector. It's not just towards. All language has an implicit movement connected to it. You can consider it just, even at the most simple, the flow of the conversation, where it's going. Yeah. And a part of the like language fucking mess up, and why it is so hard to communicate with other people and come to a common understanding, is so many of our words, like wait, like no. Every time I say no, as in knowledge, your brain also hears no as in non-affirmative. And it has to make a decision as to what the fuck I mean every time. Unless over time, because some things just take it, right? It's like practice and iteration. Myelination would be like the biological nervous system coding term. See, did I say coding as in jacket? Or did I say coding as in programming? And I'll just leave that for you. because I know what I said. I'm pretty sure you heard what I said, but that's the point, is that every time you hear something, there's these like minutia of agreements that one has to make with themselves so as to persist in a meaningful way in their perception. And then you introduce someone else and it gets all hunky-dory. Okay, so that's like my first paragraph setting, creating a bit of a contextual environment. So I am watching a bit today and a bit yesterday this Netflix series called Explained, where they're short little episodes, 15, 20 minutes, where they explain like socially like misunderstood or hard to understand or whatever bullshit type things. And I really enjoy it. I enjoy it because it informs me not just what the assumption of what they believe is kind of like hard to understand and misinterpret or whatever, but it also informs me of their rhetoric. I'm always, always open to what I don't know. In fact, I can hear something, listen to something that the words I might have heard before, or I know in a superficial by the superficial expression of whatever's being said is contrary to fact or truth, and still, by virtue of it being manifest in my environment, like so it's a part of my own creation, that there's something there that I don't know, and it just takes further examination, scrutiny. It's funny how that really blessed experience of essentially paying attention to your life have negative connotations. Examination. You're either getting probed or you're taking a test. That sucks. Scrutiny. Like, when is scrutinized ever like, yay, scrutiny? And really, it's discernment. And so, I was watching a couple episodes, and like 3 kind of just did their thing while I did my morning. And I paused / stopped at the political correctness. So there's political correctness. There was why women get paid less, and the water crises. And what's dangerous about these things is that at the superficial level that they are meaning to communicate, their intention is to inform you as truth. They're like, we did research, and this is what we know, so you can just believe it. When really it's fucking wrong. And by wrong, I mean incomplete. And it's not wrong because it's incomplete. It's wrong because it feigns completeness. And so a less discerning viewer can and will watch something like this and be like, now I know shit. Because TV said so. And now let me connect this to political correctness. with a bit of a teaser sentence. It has nothing to do with what they're actually saying. See, mainstream media, like all-encompassingly, is never really trying to convince you of whatever bullshit they're trying to say. I'm just noticing the light. I hope that you enjoy it like I do. I know it kind of like makes me maybe harder to see, but it could also make me easier to see by not focusing so clearly. So it's going on. Okay, so actually, so nigger. She said nigger. Nigger, nigger, nigger. Nigger's always been one of those fucking weird ass words for me, because I'm actually just gonna sit so that the sun is all up in my face. So if that's too bright for you, turn your brightness on your screen down. But I love the brightness. I just love being sun-kissed. Oh yeah. P.S. Looking at the sun doesn't blind you. If you don't believe me, try and find someone that was blinded by the sun. Like, try. Like, the sun, it's in the sky every day. And I was, and kind of still am, like a stupid, do anything, I dare you boy. And I say boy especially because we're a little less sensible. We're wired that way. It's a good balance. Like, everybody stares at the sun, man. Because really, you're not supposed to. So everybody fucking does it. Nobody goes blind, but everybody's afraid to. Okay. So, oh, that's right, nigger. Oh my God, he said it again. Ellen, don't say it. I hate when people say that word. So, I'll come out of the sun for a second. See the color of my skin? Yeah, what color is that? When I was a flight attendant for a minute, you actually have to write down like the color of your complexion, and they give you a list. So I'm fucking going through the list, and it's got like black, Caucasian, no, not white or something like that. I think it was Caucasian, whatever. Uh, anyway, I filled out medium because that was the thing that I was most like, medium. What color are you? I'm medium. So I grew up in, um, I live in Toronto, and so it's easily the most diverse, multicultural place in the world. I've traveled enough in the world to know that as a fact. New York proclaims it, but New York just thinks everything's New York. Um, and truly, there's no other place in the world that comes close, like not even close. That said, I uh, I grew up at a time where my community was predominantly white. My elementary school, like I remember my classes, there was like maybe four of like 30 kids. There was maybe like 4 or 5 Asians, uh, 2 black people, and everybody else was white. Interestingly, though, I, all the way through elementary school, which in Canada is junior kindergarten through till grade 8 till you're 13, and then you go to high schools. We do have like a junior high school system and whatnot, but I went to Catholic school. Uh, I never, I never even considered what I was. I didn't. feel different from everyone and like my peers. But I do remember distinctly, like I wasn't black and I wasn't Chinese. But I also didn't think I wasn't white, nor did I think I was white. I just was what I was. And when I went to high school is when it was determined by my peer group that I was black, which was news to me. That only lasted for a couple of years. A couple of years into high school, I stopped being black and I started being mixed because everybody just wanted to know. And I do mean this, like literally, the amount of times I got asked what my parents were. And they weren't asking if I was Guyanese. They wanted to know which of my parents was black and which of my parents was white. And so they got nowhere when I just looked at them and said, both my parents look like me. So it wasn't until after high school or sometime around the end when I was like, oh, okay, cool. None of that fucking matters. But I occupy this interesting space where I was allowed to say the N word, but I'm not black. The color of my skin actually comes from Indian and European. I've got the most recently, I've got it's mostly Portuguese descent, and then West Indian, which is East Indian, that moved to the West, and like a vein of Dutch, and I've got a little bit of everything except black. But I have curly hair and a permatan. So this word, not only did I occupy an interesting space as far as like my being able to use it, but it introduced an interesting way of looking at the world because I was able to observe different people's reactions to it. I belonged enough to the black community where it was brotherly, right? And I do mean brotherly because we wouldn't. It's interesting now that I'm kind of sharing it with you. Like it wouldn't cross genders so much. You know, black girls would call other black girls niggers or niggas or whatever, and black boys would refer to the same thing, but it wasn't because it was like a term of endearment. It was like bro or dude or whatever, you know. And then conversely, like I am getting I've always have, and I'm especially doing it because now I'm on like this platform where it's like nigger. And white people would be like, I can't, I can't even be around it. I'm gonna get in trouble. Because that was the fear. Right? It's not actually that they thought they'd offend anybody, because they're not saying it. And if they so chose to say it, it was never really a term of offense, except for when it was meant as a term of offense, in which case, like, more power to you, except the power had been stripped away. And what the media and what all of this political correctness would infer is that the power is being stripped away by the word. And that's not true. What's being stripped away is meaning. You think it was Black people that spread the word to all the white people? Stop using that word, it offends us. Because white people are so good at listening to Black people and what they want. Fuck no. White people decided that. And not just white people, because as a reminder, because I am getting like, I'm being like superfluously divisionary in my language purposely, but it's really not. So all people is the secret. And no words in and of themselves mean fucking anything except by what you mean by them. If somebody calls me a nigger because they're trying to hurt me, then I'm not going to receive that, especially because they use the N-word. I'm hearing that they're using their language to offend me. They're being abusive. So actually, it doesn't matter the form that their language takes. They mean to hurt me. And that's what I hear. Language is meant, in like the divine sense, to be appropriate. Nothing means anything except by what you mean by it. But when you put when we put this false sense of definition to the symbols that are words, then it takes our consciousness, it takes our sovereignty out of what we're saying and into the authority of whom I don't know, whoever we're afraid we're going to get in trouble with. And that's not even the like insidious ploy. Quite simply, it's all meant to confuse us and to divide us, right? First it was nigger, then it was Black, and then, like, I mean, you're alive right now, so chances are, if you're not too young, actually you must know, because like Black became offensive. Can't say Black. It's African American, which of course became confusing because I live in Canada. So people, like, I don't know, it sounds weird. There's less alliteration. I kid, but I'm not. And then even that got stripped away because it's not important. By saying it's not important, you're making it important. And by saying it's not important, you're making it important in a very specific way. Because whereas before, I was just describing someone. No offense. They're just words. But now I can't even describe someone. It's like, you know that, it's so funny. Because again, I'm privy to this interesting, really dichotomy, because it's super polar experience where I get to kind of be on both sides of the fence listening to all the different cultures attempt political correctness. And so just like sounds stupid. Yeah, you know that guy over there that's got red in his shoes? He's kind of like tall-ish, but not so tall. you mean you mean the white guy? Because you can't even say white now. You can't say anything. But of course you can say something. You can say whatever the fuck you want. Do you mean to be offensive? No. But here's the real kicker. All of this bullshit, how it divides is that it's not even really taking the opportunity to convey meaning as a speaker. Taking that away, what it's doing is, again, more insidious. It's like blanketing the audience. Because my meaning can be sincere and quite clear. But if I utter a word that has these PC, which I also think is interesting because I'm pretty sure like isn't that one of like our political parties? The liberals and the PCs. It's just I'm having a brain poops and I don't give a fuck. But that's on purpose as well. So especially what's especially relevant right now is all the gender this, gender that, gender this, gender that. Jordan Peterson is a Canadian, an Ontarian, whom kind of got elevated to a kind of infamy because he really he communicated, and in this day and age of everybody's got a camera, because he wasn't on a pedestal, he wasn't on a podium, he wasn't meaning to express it to the world, but it got expressed to the world because somebody got offended, and instead of taking responsibility of their own meaning and their own feelings and then working it out with maybe him, they do the same thing that all fucking lazy thinkers, feelers, because their emotional awareness is beyond them, do, and that's like they abscond their responsibility to some kind of authority. Where he's like, the short of it is, and I'm with him on this, but even like I'm expressing in a more broad way. There was like some kind of movement towards some non-gender nominative of like, we want to be called this, or I can stop there. And he's just like, what do you mean you want to be called this? You're called what you're called. Like, I'm not going to just call you something because that's what everybody's calling. Like eventually, like we'll refer to everyone like the way that we end up referring to you. It's not like we prefer they. It's like, yeah, but okay, but like I'm they. You're one person. Like, that's not how I use language, and you can't enforce some artificial, truly like artifice of a label upon me just because you say so, because it's not a name. You're not saying, hi, my name is Elliot, but I prefer if you just call me E. You're like speaking for a group of people. And it's not like you can't, it's more like it's just not natural. It's got no basis in reality or truth. And therefore, it's just it's removing meaning and putting too much emphasis on the words. Now, to tie in the episodes on the water crisis and the episode of like why women are paid less. The water crisis is all fear mongering. FYI, the technology exists. You don't have to look that hard for it to find that it exists for us to desalinate water, like salt water. The thing is that it's cheap and essentially decentralized. So there's no real industry in it, which is why we'll see it, because we'll do it. But like much technology, it's not going to be proliferated by societal industry because it frees people. Not by providing water, but it frees their minds. It frees their the truth, which is their ability to serve themselves and each other in community. But the whole episode is a lie about, for instance, 97% of the world is covered, 97 of 100% of the world's water, 97% of it is salt water. 1% is fresh water. And then the other 2% is underground. And so it's really costly to get. And so these numbers are like, oh yeah, it's a lot of numbers. For all of human history, we've done just fine on 1% of the world's water. By 2040, we're not going to have enough. By this, by that. If you go back to the 80s and just refresh yourself on some of that, the bullshit rhetoric at that time, we should all be dead right now, or irradiated, or all the water should be acid rain. Remember acid rain? I remember I connect acid rain with Captain Planet and the Planeteers. Amazing show. Love that shit. And like school projects, right? You know, we're doing the pollution. We're onto pollution. So everybody's got to do a project. And I definitely did a project on acid rain. I've never experienced acid rain. Have you experienced acid rain? I've never experienced acid rain, but it was supposed to destroy everything. Turns out it didn't. Turns out people don't want to die. And when it comes down to it, we'll, make do. Greenhouse gas, for instance. You know what? This was an interesting video that I just actually saw recently. Do you know the most the gas that contributes most to greenhouse gas? Water. 97% of our atmosphere of like the atmospheric gases that contribute to the greenhouse gas effect, which is a natural effect. If it didn't exist, then we would be on a planet like Mars. Of the few percent that's not water, carbon dioxide is like negligible, methane, and then there's like this some hydrosulfate or something like that, and that's man-made. Blah 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 blah. It's all just meant to confuse and create fear, because what does a child do when they're afraid? When I had nightmares, I ran to my parents' room. Every time. Until I didn't. And then I didn't anymore. But that episode, it's not meant to convince people that we're running out of water. It's actually just stripping meaning and instead replacing it with symbols that can represent truth, i.e. words, i.e. like logical deduction and induction, but like myopically, like it's just a little bit. Because what they're saying is, like, it's in the words, like, to desalinate water, it's so costly, it costs so much money. I fucking love when all these bullshit puppets express the challenge of fucking anything with the cost of it. Don't you know how stupid you sound? Nothing costs money. And like, we can say that like we're smart to each other. Like, you can't eat money. What are you going to do with money? You can't eat paper. What's not even paper anymore? They've conned us all now, so that we don't even have anything physical to represent the completely made up concept of monetary currency. But it's in those little tidbits where they're framing your world. Because they're not saying we're running out of water. What they're saying is, remember that you need money. And that when we run out of water, it's going to take money to make more water. If it's going to take money to make more water, it's going to take those that have money. And whereas water is a thing, and they love to tell you where they think it comes from, you never hear, you always hear it's going to cost a lot of money, but you never hear that we're going to run out of money. Hillary Clinton is a monster. And I don't mean that in like a monster truck. I'm a crush. No. As in like despicable and disgusting. People love to like it's so easy to pick sides in political drama. And she's a woman. And if you don't side with her, then basically you're saying that women can't blah 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 blah. Which brings me back to the political correctness. It's and really where it comes down to, and I've kind of inferred it by virtue of like my role playing, is they don't fucking care. Nobody, like, and by they I mean the people that decide what's political correctness or not. Because political, what's political? Why does correctness have anything to do with politics? Unless it's being managed in that sphere under like the guise of service, when really it's subservience. But now, instead of relatively, or rather maybe mediocrely intelligent people having good conversations that raises the awareness of people in their moments and by their meaning, right? By using the words that they mean as they mean it, not in any kind of offensive way. They're afraid to say anything. So what do you do when you're afraid to say anything because you don't want to be offensive? You just don't say. And that's better. That, like, isn't even really, like I said, the main point, but that is fucking wicked collateral. Not even damage. That's wicked collateral. Repo that. Because if you can't talk about it, you can't do anything about it. If you can't talk about it, you can't discuss what you actually mean by talking about it, for fear of ... It's actually just fear of the authority, because in conversation, you might not be afraid of saying a word because you're with a friend and you can kind of, or with someone that you want to be a friend and you can kind of convey meaning. But now we're more afraid of who's hearing, who's listening. Because you can be having a conversation and somebody you don't know, they don't even need a phone, can hear you, and then snicker and make a remark and then say something to the friend, and all of a sudden you're a racist. When if anybody cared enough to be correct in that affirmation, to sit down with you and talk to you about it, right? Like, I don't care who judges me, so long as their judgments don't interfere with my life. But if you can make a judgment that's going to interfere with someone's life, it's human inherently, and by that I mean loving, to like give fair dues, yo. To be certain about what you're what you're pretending certainty about, and not hiding behind a dictionary, behind an urban dictionary, behind a suburban dictionary. So this the and this is good. This will be a good kind of little wrap up because I finished my thing of coffee and I gotta pee. It's true. 55 minutes. One of the things this monster says, oh, and she's a monster because she does heinous, horrible crimes against children, against people, and you don't have to look far to discover confirmations of this. You won't find it in the mainstream media because they own the mainstream media, and I don't mean that in some conspiratorial sense. It's like these are corporations. They are owned by people. They have their private interests. I can't even fucking like hate on them for that. And if they were interested in the truth more than their own, more than like controlling the perception thereof and their own reputation, then, well, we wouldn't be discussing it. And she said something like, because the sum of the episode is that women aren't really paid more, less than men. It's women that have children are paid less. So it's like, you can't know that you're a mother. And then so she's going, and you know, like, and women are typically the caregivers, the households. First of all, our just so you know, our society has been heavily manipulated from the 1800s on. From about the 1500s to the end of the 1700s, there was basically cultural warfare. During the time which you couldn't, the truth was undisputed because you were living it. But circa 1800s and onwards, you can move forward in time and say whatever the fuck you want about the way people thought back then. And that be a mouthful of lie. But then reinforce those lies with how you treat people in the present, and then people will believe it. Patriarchy. First of all, we haven't lived in a male-dominated society for nearly as long as fucking people, as like recorded history, rather re-recorded history, recorded like a chord, like knots in a chord, like keeping track, recorded history would have you believe. Our humanity has been heavily enslaved for the last 400 or 500 years. But before that, there was about 300 years of like pretty contested warfare. Before that was about 300 years or so, maybe six, of like subterfuge that was like leading up toward. And before that, there was a whole lot of fucking harmony where borders were only conventions of like choice and manners of lifestyle, and didn't denote land ownership, because there were no borders that of owning. The concept of a singular nation separate from the rest was a non-thing. You could go wherever you wanted. So you just went where you wanted to live. I'm not speaking of a utopia. I'm speaking of the truth. Uh, Not even really cleverly hidden, hidden, but effectively occluded. So where was I? Oh yeah, patriarchy. Actually, I'm actually just gonna etymology. Fuck me. I'm just gonna find out the etymology of it with you right now because I know it, but I would rather not go for memory for the sake of argument. So patriarchy, 1560s. I study the etymology of the English language like a motherfucker. And curiously, like all of our language, the English language is circa 1200 at the earliest and 1700s ish at the latest. And commonly, what something meant in the 1200s means the exact inverse opposite. And I mean that as in like, as it's made to mean now. For instance, subservient, 1630s, useful, serviceable, present participle of subservire, assist, serve, come to the help of, lend support. The meaning slavishly obedient is first recorded 1794. Well, fuck, man. 150 years later, it means something that's kind of the opposite, but also kind of inverted. Because I would gladly say I'm subservient to the people, except now that's not what that means. See, political, 1550s, pertaining to a polity, civil affairs or government, from Latin politicus, of citizens or the state, meaning taking sides in party politics, usually pejorative, is from 1749. Political prisoner, first recorded in 1860. So patriarchy, 1560s. In ecclesiastical sense, from Greek patriarcha, patriarchia, meaning system of society or government by fathers or elders or elder males of the community, first recorded 1630s. So it didn't even mean anything male related until 1630s. So let's look at patriarch. One of the Old Testament fathers, but remember, is the Old French, but remember Greek, chief or head of a family, from patria, family, clan. Okay, and there's like, and that's mostly it. And I mean to share this most potently for an indication of the obscene manipulation, not just of what words mean, but the removal of subjective and experiential meaning, and the like installments of words in and of themselves having not a symbolic meaning, but a definitive one, which is contrived in and of itself. There is no definition unless you create the concept of a definition and then subject your world to those definitions, and then again install a kind of authority by really trickery. Because like, look at subservience. It's like, we're going to use that word, we're going to spread it around, it's going to mean good things, and then slowly we'll start using it maybe in the code of law to mean something different. And so psychologically, and like in a matter pertaining to our own identity, especially in an unconscious way, people are self-identifying as subservient, and then subservience means something else. This creates this conflict, which is really just an opening to in 1700s or 1800s be like, look, we've got all these things from we've all these writings from the 1500s, and women have always been subservient. When really, when it was written, it's just saying perhaps women were much more inclined to service to other. But now it means slavishly obedient. And so we just took that word and enslaved the past with it. And by virtue of enslaving the past, we're enslaving your future, because your future never exists. It's always right now. And you can't create it. You can't create it unless you believe you can. And so kind of in closing, she said something like, we're going back to the loser. And that whole political dichotomy. It's like I'm so glad Trump won. Because first of all, I don't give a fuck. It's all contrived anyways. And I'm not just using that word again because I used it before. It's the right word. But she's a monster. Pedophilia, killing, abuse. And let them all be rumors. Let them all be lies. How much of that, like every lie, has a sliver of truth? Because otherwise it would just be denied and readily proven. So she goes on, like, oh, women are the householders, the caretakers. Historically they've been that way, which is a lie. And it's not a lie. It's a lie, but this is how it's a lie. So are men. but like equal rights, equal, and it goes on to say, like, that we should, like, we're entitled to equal payment, when really what they're saying is, what they're spouting is complete and utter bullshit. It doesn't matter what they're saying. What they're really entraining your nervous system, your thought patterns with, is this false sense of history, this false sense of continuity. By using these fallacies of balance, right? Equal. 1 + 1 = 2. But 1 + 1 isn't the same as 2. 1 + 1 is arithmetic. It's addition. 2 is 2. It's saying that the sum, the product of 1 + 1, with plus being the operator, equals 2. Not the same as, but equality. Yay. You got to believe in equality, because if you don't believe in equality, you're bad. And lo, if you express that, because who doesn't believe in equality? How could you not believe in equality? Shame, shame, shame. Women want to work just as much as men. By saying that, what they're actually saying is that that's disputed. That it's a point of disputation. Disputation? That's a point to be disputed, whatever. When it's not. Because what they want to keep framing is paid. What they want to keep framing, it's not even just the division. Right? Because, like I've said this in other videos, it's like the story of, because I grew up with this, especially like as a man, and being raised in a single mother household. Women are the, they've had to be stay-at-homes. They stayed home and took care of the children. And it was just this fucking derogatory turn of phrase. When the older I got, the more I was like, yo, it sounds to me actually like men got the fucking rough side of that. Like, how I would have, like, I like stay at home. No one's a stay-at-home mom. But let my job be to take care of my family and not have to go to fucking work. At least as a part of a system that is enslaving, my everyday is at least committed to my best effort to something that it would be anyways. But that's not the story. I'm sure actually it was the story once upon a time, until it became more convenient to flip it. And so, in closing, if I hadn't made it abundantly clear, my opinion, and if I may, my collective pulsing suggestion as a person, as a human. Release the definition of things and live your life by the meaning conveyed. There is only one route to living successfully in this way, and that is emotional determination. A subject for actually lessons and at least greater explanation. But this goes along with the same linear brainwashing. We have the reptilian brain, they call it, yeah. The autonomic nervous system, then the limbic system, and then like the prefrontal cortex, or like the what we call the human brain. It's like the reptilian, the mammalian, the human, and they sequence it in that order. The limbic system is what they say is responsible for emotions. So emotions are subservient to what comes next, which is the human brain. But it doesn't even take that much like retroductive like exploration to be like, okay, well, the reptilian brain cultivated the limbic system, which then only really made possible to form this human brain. But in the order, it's not first, second, third. It's bottom, like inferior aspect, and then middle, center, and then superior, outer. The limbic system isn't second place. It is by far the most complex and advanced expression of our nervous system. What makes us human isn't our prefrontal cortex. The development thereof allowed us to then access the whole brain as determined by the limbic system. The limbic system is like sensational. I'm really simplifying because I'm just making a final point about the importance of emotional determination. Your prefrontal cortex, your this like the executive decision, the deciding making of aspect of your brain. There's no feelings, and by that I mean sensation. How many of your decisions do you make numb to fucking everything? I want to say that maybe not your best choices were ever made like blottoed out of your face or sleeping. There is no limbic system. There is no fight or flight. There is no decision making without the synthesis of the whole, which is your limbic system. Greatly oversimplifying, but not erroneously, and not in a misleading way. Words mean things. But only when you mean them. But that's the easy part. The challenge is to listen, and emotionally determine yourself. To not be determined by the other, but to be self-determined. Understanding that even that the speaker may be unawares, like when I watch fucking anything on TV. I'm not relying on their awareness of their meaning conveyance. I take that responsibility. And it's not arbitrary, but through a life of insisting on freedom and happiness and connection and caring, I owe it to loving to be that kind of responsible. So he said, she said, doesn't matter. Don't rest on the words people say. And be the good that you wish to see by being a good reflection. And when somebody says something that might be misconstrued as rude, forget like the root words and remember who you're talking to. Is that person meaning to be rude to you? Well, they're not meaning to be rude to me, but they are. Be more responsible than that. This is compassion. In this way, you're never correcting them. First of all, you could just let it fucking go, because they can say something that might be misconstrued as rude, but it's not being misunderstood by you. So instead, you just continue because you understand their meaning. And should there be a point of dispute, that's when, in loving kindness, you ask for clarification, which is not accusing. Right? It's not, oh, you're trying to say that I'm, no. I totally hear you. I understand, but there's something that I don't understand. When you said this, I heard this by your meaning. But I can also hear, maybe somebody else might hear this rude version. So, what did you mean? And then you guys will have a word party, choosing new and different words to further define, not the words themselves, but yourselves and your relationships with each other, which, FYI, is you defining your world. And when you look up every word in love, then that's the letter that every word starts with. And you'll know when it doesn't. Nothing to prove. That's when you move. You turn the other cheek. Or you give theirs the back of your hand. But don't let the way things look get in the way of the way things feel. Like I love you. Just let that mean the most. Warm and kind and appropriate, or unreasonable, but still true. Because if I could, that's the meaning that I would give you. Your worthiness and love. And that being the only truth. I fucking love you. Until we do it again. You'll be there and I'll be here. And if I lived on a planet in a galaxy far, far, far away, we could say that you and I are got a lot of distance between us. But instead, we're both on this one, on this earth, and in a universe vast, at least in imagination, to be born and present at the same time and on the same planet. There's nowhere you and I could be in the scope of the universe that isn't relatively always side by side. If you get my meaning. Have a lovely everything. Namaste. And love you too.